14 states are considering anti-drag show legislation. There are more than 120 anti-trans bills in state legislatures, and 19 states have laws restricting gender-affirming care. It's Pride Month. New York City lawmakers are seeking equitable treatment for the LGBTQ+ community. The Point starts right now. Tiffany Caban and Crystal Hudson are co-chairs of the New York City Council's LGBTQ+ Caucus. I'd like to start by talking to you about what seems to be a resurgence of hate in New York City. Several times, pride flags were torn down. There have been attacks and graffiti on some council member's office, Eric Butcher. And I just wonder, what do you think is going on? Why are we now experiencing this seeming resurgence in hate? Crystal?
I think, you know, it's the right wing for sure. They are infusing hatred in everything. We've seen across the country 542 and counting bills that have been introduced and passed attacking our community, and in particular trans youth.
Tiffany?
Yeah, I mean, just to expand on what Crystal said, MAGA extremists are fomenting violence not just across the country, but in big cities. I think people think that in big blue cities, you know, we're sort of inoculated against certain types of hate, but it's just not true. Our communities are diverse, and it only takes a small subset of really determined, organized people to create hate and harm in communities.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you both say that it's the right-wing extremists that are causing this, because there's a recent Gallup poll which showed that Americans are less accepting of gay marriage. It was 71% that approved, now it's 64%. And the pollsters attribute it to the activities of Republicans. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, we're seeing, and I'm not to say that it started with Trump, but certainly momentum built, where you're seeing a resurgence and just more public activity without apology of white supremacist organizing and action. And so it's becoming okay to act in certain ways, to be certain ways in communities. And so right now what we're trying to do is really infuse and make sure that we are creating welcoming communities. And they're doing it across factions, right? It's why we're seeing the book bans, why we're seeing all these limitations on libraries and curriculum in schools. Those things also contribute to what we're seeing.
Crystal?
Yeah, I mean, the Human Rights Campaign just earlier this month declared a state of emergency. I mean, that's how dire things are. This year alone, there have been 75 laws that have been passed, which is the worst on record. So, you know, as Tiffany mentioned, there's a lot of momentum.
But see, you both mentioned that what's going on makes it seem like it's okay to hate, which it's not. And I wonder how you feel about the fact that that Elon Musk just announced that Twitter would no longer allow terms like cis or sissy to be used on Twitter. And I wonder what kind of a message that sends to younger people who are social media people. I mean, isn't that disturbing?
It's absolutely disturbing, and something that you have to understand about the queer community is what connects us a lot of times isn't just geography, right? When we have sort of these identity affinity communities, a lot of times it's the people with you, but to build community across, you know, being part of the LGBTQ+ community, you find it in lots of different ways. And so the internet and social media was a lifeline amongst a community that, because of not being accepted, was experiencing and is experiencing record high numbers of suicide rates and suicide attempts. And so making these spaces that once were safe havens in the way that in the 50s and 60s maybe our queer bars were for younger folks, it's devastating, right? It feels violent, and situation, it certainly makes you feel unsafe. And so people have to find other ways to be in community in ways that feel safe.
So, Crystal, were you disappointed when you saw what Elon Musk did?
Yeah, I mean, the reality, too, is that cis and cisgender is not a slur, right? Tiffany and I are both cisgender women. Some members of our community are transgender. But to use the terminology that is factually correct is not a slur, and so shouldn't be treated as such.
But does it send the wrong message to young people who are social media users?
Absolutely, it sends the wrong message. All of these messages, all of these bills and statements and bans send continuously the wrong message to our youth, which is that they're not accepted, they're not normal, and we need to be doing exactly the opposite and creating safe spaces.
So both of you have, as co-chairs of the caucus, have come up with a very long position paper, and you have a large agenda that you'd like to see adopted. I'd like to talk about some of those if I could. First of all, you'd like to rename the Queensboro Bridge. Tell me about that. Why? I just thought that was interesting.
Well, I will say that, just to start, and I'll let you expand on it, but this was a lot of fun because we're both policy nerds, and you mentioned the bridge, but that is one thing out of a vast number of things, right? Like, we're talking about...
We'll get to them, I promise.
Yeah. No, totally. But, I think it's part of saying that we're going to acknowledge history. We're going to acknowledge where harm was done. One of our colleagues actually introduced a bill, Councilmember Sandy Nurse, that sort of would say, hey, we're going to take down racist statues, or we're going to put up a plaque next to them that shows the true history of the harm that was done. And so this is about accurate reflections of our history, and that people feel seen and heard when they navigate the city.
Yeah, and part of the process in creating this plan was going to our community and getting input from different members of our community, different advocates and allies and organizations, LGBTQIA plus led organizations. And so one of those groups, this is a top priority for them, and so we wanted to make sure that our plan was as inclusive as possible, and that includes, as Tiffany mentioned it to her point, ensuring that nomenclature is reflective of our community and the harm that it's caused, that certain folks have caused to our community, but also trying to empower and uplift the names and the people who have actually done good.
The reason I wanted to talk about the Queensboro Bridge is because it is named for Ed Koch, who was a gay American, although had trouble coming out of the closet. And I thought how sad it was for him that he wasn't able to speak to his truth. And I wondered if you felt the same way.
Yeah, I think, what this is about, and again, what certain advocates have brought to our attention, is the fact that he wasn't able to come out, and therefore also put forth a lot of really harmful legislation, didn't really act during an AIDS crisis. And so this is an opportunity to at least, everything in here are recommendations and suggestions. So what we're saying in this plan is that we would like to see the bridge named after somebody who is a hero in the community.
Marsha Johnson or something?
Exactly, Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, for whom our plan is named after. Two trans women of color activists who fought so hard for equity.
So what about the issue of obtaining medical treatment for minors seeking gender-affirming care? Isn't that another one of your goals?
Absolutely, and it has to be a priority, especially at a time when that right is being attacked across the country. And so it's not just going to be New York City residents, right, that are seeking that care, but we also want to be a safe haven so that folks who can't get care elsewhere can come here and know that they're going to get that life-saving care that they absolutely need, and quite frankly is a human right.
Right. So, Crystal, what about enhancing anti-bullying and harassing requirements? Another one of your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make sure that we're investing in all of those resources to prevent that from happening. Another one is investing $5 million to help families who might have family members who come out, youth who come out, making sure that they have all the resources available to them so that they can actually accept and support their children rather than kicking them out of their homes.
What about the idea of more LGBTQ plus jobs in city government?
I mean, when you look around the city, pensions are a thing of the past, right? And so career pathways that provide economic stability, that allow people to build some generational wealth and to retire with dignity is something that has been long hard for the queer community to obtain, right? And so creating pathways like the Pride at Work initiative so that people have jobs in areas where, quite frankly, lots of folks have been discriminated against and have not been able to get those jobs is a way to keep our community safe. Because at the end of the day, also, at the most core basic level, I think this is a plan that optimizes health and safety outcomes for every single New Yorker.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back.